America has a new national security policy.
They now call it the Donroe Doctrine, I don't know.
And Donald Trump says he wants nothing short of
the American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never be questioned again.
All the old tools of American empire, blockades, embargoes, psychological warfare, clandestine action, regime change, military invasion, it's all back on the table.
And the Monroe Doctrine is a big deal, but we've superseded it by a lot, by a real lot.
And we're already seeing it being put into action. In an extraordinary, brazen, and clearly illegal action, Trump ordered military strikes against Venezuela to kidnap dictator Nicolas Maduro. And it looks like Donald Trump is just getting started.
Under the Trump administration, we are reasserting American power in a very powerful way in our home region.
Right, but can you say that military action against Greenland is off the table?
What do you mean military action against Greenland? The Greenland has a population of 30,000 people, Jake. Nobody's going to fight the United States militarily over the future of Greenland.
My name is Justin Ling, and this is Soft Power, a show all about how diplomacy, security, aid, trade, spying, and real politics shapes the world around us. On this episode, I want to break down this new Donroe Doctrine, and particularly what it means for everybody else. Over the time that Donald Trump has been in power, it's often been pretty difficult to figure out what he's going to do next. That's why, when he unveiled his national security strategy in December, lots of people sat up and paid attention. And for good reason. This document is about as close as you're going to get to a guide for how America is likely to act in the coming years. And I've got a copy of it right here. It promises nothing less than the restoration of American preeminence in the Western Hemisphere. It obsesses over the importance of Western identity. And it warns that one of the most pressing, if not the most pressing crisis facing the Western world is civilizational erasure. I want to talk a little bit about what some of this stuff means going forward, but first I think it's pretty important to know where it comes from.
It's Monroe Doctrine. We sort of forgot about it. It was very important, but we forgot about it. We don't forget about it anymore.
This strategy borrows heavily from one of the most aggressive eras of American power. So let's start by going all the way back to President James Monroe, the father of the Monroe Doctrine. Now, it's going to be a pretty brief stop because beyond a single speech he gave in 1823, Monroe didn't actually contribute much to this doctrine at all. The Americas, Monroe told Congress that year, are free and independent and are henceforth not to be considered subjects for future colonization by any European powers. This idea got twisted and distorted very quickly. Over the ensuing decades, the Monroe Doctrine was invoked in the name of fighting pirates, protecting American interests, plundering resources, overthrowing governments, putting down revolutions, seizing territory, supporting democratic governments, protecting the African slave trade, and sometimes it was just about blowing things up. At times, the US framed these interventions as a crusade against, quote, savages who were secretly conspiring with the Europeans and who wanted nothing less than the extermination against the white race. Other times, this marauding and plundering was done by private mercenaries. This was a practice known as the filibuster. So, the Monroe Doctrine has this really long and frankly weird history. The really short version is, it became an excuse, a really convenient way for America to justify any and all action, especially in the Americas. But I want to spend a little bit more time talking about one particular moment in the history of the doctrine because I think it's really reflective of our current moment. In 1903, Europe really did launch military action in the Americas, in, of all places, Venezuela. After Caracas had racked up this huge debt, putting down a revolution, the European powers came to collect. When Venezuela couldn't pay up, Germany and Britain blockaded its ports. But the whole thing turned into a mess. British ships bombarded one of the Venezuelan ports, and the state fell into chaos. The whole affair prompted Roosevelt to update the Monroe Doctrine, adding what he called the Roosevelt Corollary. This was a plan under which America, a civilized nation, could act as an international police power to stop wrongdoing. American intervention skyrocketed. Under this new strategy, America occupied or otherwise controlled Haiti, Cuba, Nicaragua, and invaded a host of other countries. It used military and economic power to give American business extraordinary control over the region. Roosevelt and his successors used tariffs to bully the Americas to accept more and more US-made goods. Secretary of State Robert Olds put it pretty bluntly in 1926 when he wrote that we do control the destinies of Central America. Major General Smedley Butler years later phrased it even less charitably. He said he spent his time in the Marines as a gangster for capitalism in Central America. I go through all this history because this is what Donald Trump wants to return to. Maybe he doesn't realize it, but his advisors sure do. When Trump unveiled his national security strategy, he even came up with a title for it, the Trump Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. It wasn't until later that he settled on the Donroe Doctrine because, frankly, it's funny. It goes without saying that Trump is, just like Roosevelt, anti-free trade and pro-tariff, and he very much sees American power as a way to help American businesses and to remake the world in his image. And it's fitting that this new strategy, just like the old strategy, promises more deployments, more control of shipping lanes, and generally more American involvement in the entire hemisphere. Trump, just like Roosevelt, is also obsessed with the Panama Canal. But fittingly, this new strategy, like the old one, really begins in Venezuela. Over recent months, Trump has put his new doctrine into action by enacting a massive naval blockade of Venezuela. He blamed the Maduro regime for importing fentanyl into America, which isn't true, although Venezuela does traffic a lot of cocaine, and he launched waves of bombings of alleged drug smuggling boats in the Caribbean Sea. Trump has complained that Venezuela had decades ago stolen American oil, so he began seizing Venezuelan oil tankers. And finally, as he escalated his rhetoric, Trump sent in waves of Marines to decapitate Maduro's regime and arrest the autocrat. But what's even more interesting and frankly troubling is that Trump's plans for Venezuela don't stop there. In fact, Trump has insisted that America will control the Venezuelan government and that it will resist appointing a member of the country's opposition to transfer the country into democracy. That's bad. Instead, Trump has talked openly about cooperating with the remnants of Maduro's regime to seize billions of dollars worth of oil.
Cars, we have more gasoline than anybody. And now with Venezuela, we have 62% of the market when you include Venezuela.
And it doesn't stop there. The administration is already talking about a new plan to topple the long-standing communist regime in Cuba. On top of that, when he was asked about Colombian President Gustavo Petro, who was democratically elected, Trump said, quote, "He better wise up or he'll be next."
He has cocaine mills and cocaine factories. He's not going to be doing it very
So there will be an operation by the U.S. and
It sounds good to me.
But as this document notes, Trump has a lot of use for friendly governments in the region. That includes El Salvador, where the government has been taking in waves of American deportees and subjecting them to torture. It includes Argentina, where Trump has recently extended a $20 billion bailout, and Honduras, where Trump has pardoned their narco-trafficking ex-president and endorsed his hand-picked successor. This is the Donroe Doctrine in action. Now, if you go further north, the United States has doubled down on its plans to purchase, annex, or even possibly invade Greenland. Again, you can find evidence of this plan right here in the document. I'll read you a little bit. It says, "We must resecure our own independent and reliable access to the goods we need to defend ourselves and preserve our way of life. This will require expanding American access to critical minerals and materials while countering predatory economic practices." On another page, this strategy says that America will be, quote, "establishing or expanding access in strategically important locations." Now, what sets this plan apart from its historical precedents is that this is promising to actively meddle in Europe. And to that end, the strategy explicitly promises to fight against this dreaded civilizational erasure that is supposedly happening all across Europe. The White House is now promising to, quote, "help Europe correct its current trajectory." It says it'll do that by supporting, quote, "patriotic European parties, the ones who oppose transnational institutions like the European Union." At the same time, Trump is going to push for strategic stability with Russia.
Que Donald Trump comme Vladimir Poutine, ils défendent les intérêts de leur nation d'abord. Voilà. Ils sont pas en train de défendre.
Again, we've already seen this strategy being put into action. The Trump administration has openly supported far-right parties across Europe, from the UK's Reform to France's Rassemblement National to Germany's Alternative for Deutschland. It has also forged tighter bonds with Viktor Orban, Hungary's strongman leader. What we're seeing is Trump supporting parties that want to break up the EU and become closer with Russia. That makes a lot of people in Europe unbelievably nervous. In many ways, this is back to the future. Roosevelt had gunboat diplomacy. Trump calls it peace through strength. Roosevelt did dollar diplomacy. Trump calls it commercial diplomacy. But this is all the same thing. Trump even explicitly says that this is about providing leverage over countries that want access to our markets. In even more ways, though, this is something altogether new and quite terrifying.
President, earlier on last year, you had mentioned, you had indicated that you wanted to take back the Panama Canal. I know we've heard a lot about Greenland. Is that still on the table?
I don't want to tell you that.
As first reported by PBS News, the president intensified his threats against Greenland, suggesting that because he did not win the Nobel Peace Prize, he would not feel bound to pursue only peaceful means to acquire the territory. In a letter to Norway's Prime Minister, Mr. Trump wrote, "Considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace, although it will always be predominant, but can now think about what is good and proper for the United States of America. The world is not secure unless we have complete and total control of Greenland."
Over the past year, there's been a lot of debates that have played out in the corridors of power all around the world. And the conversations go like this. Does Donald Trump seriously mean what he keeps saying? While this document doesn't lay out exactly what he'll do next, where he may invade, who he may try and annex, how he could enact a regime change or obtain new resources, I think it's pretty good evidence that, yeah, he means it. That is it for this episode of Soft Power. Thank you so much for watching to the end, and please, if you enjoyed it, click the like button, subscribe to the channel, send it to a friend. If you haven't already, go back and watch our first two videos. They're all about Russia's cynical power play in Central Africa and the death of America's foreign aid program. This episode was written and hosted by me, Justin Ling, and edited by Conway Gaskin. This show is made possible thanks to a very generous grant from Bigger Than Our Borders. For more on them, head over to biggerthanourBorders.ca.